And going from that into my guest, I want to bring Carl David Blake onto the show. He's been on before. He's a fascinating man, very talented, a film director, an international best-selling author, producer, screenwriter, a Guinness World Record holder. Carl has written, directed, and produced 7 independent films, including the innovative Differences Between Men and Women, which set the record for the longest wedding dress train. I love it. As a professor of English and communications, Carl has inspired countless students and authored college English textbooks for HarperCollins. Carl David Blake Productions creates movies that make people think. Carl is the author of Ingénée, the most powerful woman who ever lived. And boy, oh boy, you want to check out our last interview about that, but we are going to talk about that again today. And his latest accomplishment is the release of his novel, Dance With Me, the Karmic love affair that dangerously changed a young Mumbai woman, based on his acclaimed Bollywood-inspired screenplay. And the story blends romance, karmic retribution, and family drama. And it literally showcases Carl's amazing skill to weave emotional depth and cultural nuance into his writings. Welcome to the show, Carl, and thank you for your patience with that long introduction.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Loretta. It's wonderful to catch up with you. So let me give you a couple things on what I've been up to, because we just want to mention the Ingénée book briefly before we go to Dance With Me. Right now, I'm finishing up my next book. It's on advanced writing. It's not a novel. I taught in English, and I saw the issues that students were having with their writing skills. And so I wrote a book, and I'm focusing it more towards the young entrepreneurs, because I've seen so many of these venture capitalists have these founders, as they call them, the founders and funders, and their presentations were atrocious, and they're asking for literally hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, and they don't have some of the basic skills of speaking, and definitely not writing with writing the decks, and they don't even know the rules. So this one is going to be focused on those guys, so hopefully they can get the money and get the dreams that they've been looking for. So that's actually in the final proofreading stages. So I'll let you know, and of course I'll send you a book when that's done, because that's going to be a very interesting one. And in the book that I wrote with Amit Goswami, we had one of the directors tell us about his story, about how he launched his career and how he actually launched Tom Hanks' career. And so I do have the original story of that in this new book, and there was it's a lot more in-depth, and there's a lot darker part in it, too, which I can't wait for people to read. I have that as a whole chapter. So my friend Armand, who's a great film director.
And you co-authored a book with Amit Goswami. It was Quantum...
activation. Yeah.
Quantum activation. Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah.
So we had Armand's essay in that one, and I got the story behind the story, and it's absolutely fascinating on how he launched his whole career. So I have that in there, because when you want to be an entrepreneur, you got to take control of everything. You have to take control of everything. You're out there. So this book is going to give, with my experiences teaching English, and so what the students really need help with, my focus was always on English composition. In English it could be anything. It could be literature, it could be poetry. Mine was mostly focused on English composition. So I saw a lot of the stuff that the school system just never taught the kids. They just never taught the kids. So I see that when I was in college, I had to go back in freshman English and cover sentence structure skills. And it took me about 4 to 6 weeks. 4 to 6 weeks just to cover a sentence structure skills, because they say you're not going to learn current events, you're not going to learn literature, you're not going to learn arts, you're not going to learn philosophy, you're not going to learn any of that other stuff. You're going to go from the sentence, vocabulary building, the word, to the sentence, to the paragraph, to the essay. And we probably won't even get to the essay. Forget about the research paper. So I started from scratch, and I got a lot of positive feedback from the students, and they kept saying, nobody ever taught us this. So I do that in the book, and I really go through, the importance of vocabulary because English has the largest vocabulary of any language that ever existed in the history of the world. That's why you want to learn vocabulary. To master this language is very, very difficult. To grunt your way through it, it's easy. But to really master it is very difficult. So that's that book. So I will let you know more about it as it comes up, when it gets published, and it'll be on Amazon as well. So the Ingénée book, deep breath. This has been the most bizarre thing I've ever done. Weird things have been happening. There's your storm out there, and then my internet just died 30 minutes before anyway. So we still couldn't do it over there. Just weird stuff has been happening. This very powerful, extremely knowledgeable woman back then. I don't know why, because we're definitely into the second Dark Ages, and she was in the Dark Ages. So it's so odd, all of these connections on what's going on, and I feel like her little spirit is speaking to me. And just the other day, a friend said, "Carl, you need to go to Calais, France, to see if you can't find the path that she took." Because couldn't have been that many medieval churches along the way, to the coast of Calais on where she was, and you could look them up. She said, "I think you should go over there and see if you can't find the actual path that she took to Dover." And I'm like, something, you got me interested. So I was going to ask you about that, because I'm writing the second book. It's not a priority right now, but just things that I'm finding out about history, this is unbelievable. With her grandmother being born in Damascus, going, this is unreal of all the things I'm finding out. I did not know until a couple months ago Damascus was the most important city in the entire Mideast. How would I know that? So, just these things connecting is just blowing my mind. Is absolutely blowing my mind. And I won't mention the name, but one of the most prominent priests out there on the internet requested the book. So I sent it to him, so we'll see what happens with that. So it's just garnering up slow support, but there's a lot of resistance. So nothing I've ever done had that much resistance.
I just want to throw a couple of comments in there, and then I want you to keep talking. First of all, for those people that are not familiar with your book, Ingénée, this is a story that it's such a mystery around how he did it, but it's a true story, and it's called Ingénée, the most powerful woman who ever lived. And I'm going to tell you right now, you need to go to France and do that, because when you start talking about that, I was in rolling goosebumps, which is, we get these indicators when people are right on track. And I also know that when something comes up against resistance, which is what's going on with you, and we'll give the audience a little bit more information in a minute, around this book, that it needs to come out. Not to get to whatever, but there is literally a battle between light and dark that's been going on this planet for a long, long time. And we're in the time of the truth coming out, or the light being shown on certain aspects of ourselves, our societies, the way that we've been, and like you said, the Dark Ages. This age of Aquarius, the Pluto movement, is helping us come out of the second Dark Ages. And so I'm just going to say, yes, go do it. That's what I'm going to say. So give the audience just a little bit more information about how this book came about, because it's, to me, one of the most fascinating books I think I've ever read. And
thank you.
Yeah. So how did it come about? Go ahead. Yeah, just launch into that.
The book came about. It's really weird because people ask me, was your major in English? My undergraduate is in biology and zoology. That's the weird part about it. And I was just fascinated with writing, and I wanted to finish it because I love biology. People say, constantly, I never use my degree. I use my degree every single day of my life. Every time I look on the back of ingredients on what junk they're putting in our food, I'm like, oh, I understand what that is. What the heck are they putting that there for? So I use it every single day. People are talking about, health and, fitness all the time. So I use that. But anyway, when I was an undergraduate, I was in Florida at that time. That's where I went to college, University of South Florida. And that's where I got both my bachelor's and my master's degree. And I was at one of the conferences, either Modern Language or one of those literature conferences. And I believe I was up in Tallahassee at the time, and there was a medieval professor, and I wanted to know, what, I asked him, I said, well, who is your favorite character of all time, real or imaginary? Because if anybody, was curious, like people debate like which favorite characters there are. Sometimes they feel like Spider-Man and Superman. And they did this like 50-year study. And they want to know from religion, art, philosophy, science, real or imaginary, who is the most popular character of all time. And they came up with a character. And it wasn't God, Satan, Jesus, Muhammad. It was Moses. Moses was the most beloved and favorite character of all time. So I was expecting him to say that. When I read about that, I'm like, that's really interesting, because I like Moses. I love any man who could beat an entire country with a stick. That's my guy,
I was just in Jordan last fall and went to Moses Mountain and where the shrine up there to Moses, and it's pretty fantastic. But yeah, keep going.
Wow, we gotta. Yeah. I offline. I definitely want to talk to you about that. That would be fascinating.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So it was Moses, because there was no empty promises. There was no waiting. He said, he walked up to Pharaoh and said, "Let my people go." He said, "Hey, this ain't an option." So Moses was. I never heard anybody dislike Moses. He's a prophet in Islam. He's a prophet in Judaism, Christianity, Catholicism, and he's even respected in other religions. So when I went up to this medieval professor, I said, "Who is your favorite character of all time?" And he goes, "Ingénée." I'm like, "Who's Ingénée?" And he goes, "She is the woman who did everything right. She got favored by God. She did everything right." I said, "I never heard of her." And when he was telling other stories with other people there, but he pulled me aside and told me your story. I said, "This is the most fascinating woman I've ever heard of in my life. She was blessed as a little kid. She was a genius. She was a traveling scholar at like 4 years old in a time when most people were illiterate. And she was speaking 4, 5, 6 languages. She was helping her father, who was a traveling scholar. And that's how all the kingdoms learned. They learned by traveling scholars. Even in the movie Amadeus, you'll notice that Mozart was a traveling scholar, and that's how he got money. That's how he got paid. So you even heard like he doesn't want to take any more students on and stuff like that. And that was, he was a very young traveling scholar too. Well, she was way younger than he was. She was doing this at an extremely young age, setting up appointments with her, father, taking over some of his students, and just a fascinating woman who did everything right, extremely strong and powerful. And she also learned the arts of fighting, swordsmanship. And I don't know if you've ever fenced. There's many different types. There's foil fighting, saber fighting, and others. She mastered them all. And with the Tachi sword that she had, which she mastered, I didn't even know about it. I looked it up, while writing the book. And what happened was I wrote the screenplay at the beginning of it. That was a separate screenplay. It was called Unprotected, and it started getting a lot of interest on it. And before COVID, I thought, I almost had the funding, everything, and then COVID just crushed everything. So I looked at this story, and I merged these two to give the introduction to Ingénée. And she is I was telling my friend, I said, Ingénée just took over the story. I'm not even writing it. I'm just dictating. And there's no way I would know some of the things that she told me. Like, for example, I mentioned, I was watching our last interview. For example, she, and when I said, how big is that boat? You went from Calais, France, to Dover. She had 365 feet. I'm like, there's no way 365 feet. Because I know Columbus's boat were 50 to 70 feet. And there's no way you had a boat there. I know you're lying. I'm going to Google it. This is like in my dream. I'm dreaming this. And I
Right.
and then I looked it up. I found out that the largest boat at that time was 379 feet. There's no way in hell I would know that. There's no way I would know that. Impossible. And then I'm looking it up, and they say, when did the tea trade go around in England? And then when did it become popular? It became popular around the late 1600s, mostly early 1700s. And I'm like, no. I'm thinking, well, Ingénée said that the tea trade was in the medieval period. And then I asked her in my dream, I said, what happened in the dream? She said, do you actually think that during the trade route from Ethiopia to Scandinavia, that the French and the English never tried the herbs and spices that went across, that they were shipping? I'm like, okay, you won. I'm just dictating from now on, And so when I heard these things, and even in the dream, I said, she explained to me her grandmother, and that a lot of the stuff the medieval professor told me, but the little details were through my dreams. So when I heard about Damascus, this is something recent, and I'm like, wait a second, how did I know it was the most powerful city and the most important city during the medieval period, during Ingénée's time in the Middle East? And I was like, wow, I'm just paying attention to this stuff, going, this is unbelievable. So that's how that happened. So I'm thinking about going to Calais, France to see if I could trace it. And you also, you going to Jordan, that might be another trip for me later on. And I might want to actually take the route, the ferry across there to Calais to Dover and see what goes on. So that is on my, and that might be a second trip because I got to see where those medieval, you could look up all those churches and how they've been burned down nonstop.
Yep. Yes, they have been.
And so, that's what the Ingénée book. So we're talking so much about the Ingénée book. I want to make sure we have enough time to talk with Dan.
Oh, yeah. We will. We're going to take a little station break, and we'll come back and talk about your new book, Dance With Me. But I want to make a couple of comments to the Carl David Blake is on my show, and just before the break, like I said, we were talking about his book, Ingénée, the most powerful woman who ever lived. And now I want to switch over to your new book, Dance With Me, the Karmic Love Affair that dangerously changed a young Mumbai woman. And once again, if you're listening, just go buy these books. Come on now. They're really, really fun. I sound like one of those call-in, like if you call the 800 number that they give you a little sales pitch. But I don't mind doing that for you, Carl. I'll do it anytime. So tell us about your new book. I understand that you have a screenplay, and I told you before the show, and you may have even mentioned it, this better become a Bollywood movie. I can't wait. So please tell us about your book.
Well, yeah, the book started out as a screenplay. So I wrote the screenplay and won several awards, even in the most prestigious screenwriting award in the world is the Nickel Awards because it's run by the Academy Awards, and they let you know if you're in the top 5 or 10%, and mine got up there. And I know I would have done a lot better because I sent it in before my final draft because I was excited. I should have waited and refined it one more time because there's some techniques I should have used, but that's okay. So what happened was during COVID, a lot of the budgets got crushed. And I actually met Gulshan Grover, the bad man of Bollywood, one of the most famous Bollywood actors. And I gave him the screenplay, and he loved it. We had lunch 3 times. So I met the bad man of Bollywood. He told me a lot of the funny stories about Bollywood and stuff like that. So I lost contact with him. I got to go contact him again and let him know that I did this. But I would like to wait until I get the screenplay done before I do that. But so the book was based on the screenplay, which will then be based on the new version of the book. One of the things that when you write the book, it gives you the opportunity to do more backstory. It gives you an opportunity to write more than you need. So there is another couple twists in this book that weren't in the screenplay. It was a twist on it. There's a lot of karmic twists in here. You got it goes down many different rabbit holes over 2 generations of Indian women. And at that time, Mumbai was called Bombay, and it was just and I mentioned that in the book, so I refer to Bombay at first and then Mumbai, out of respect. But at that time, they considered it Bombay. So it really is a very romantic movie. It's based on dance, and it has to do with a woman really falling in love with a man, a white guy in a hospital. Something happened to him, and I won't tell you. You're going to have to read that first chapter. Really intense. This book is not just about, it's way more intense than the Bollywood. There's murder, there's betrayal, there's a lot of stuff in here. A lot of stuff that you got to pay attention to. So it's one of the, I think it's one of the most fascinating books that I've written because it really goes into the heart of romance with crossing these two cultures and the time period of two cultures. So you see the first level of the first generation on how they viewed romance and the second generation. It goes back and forth. I had to badger my Indian friends all day long with even the final things as the desserts on how they have meanings and what they call the desserts with the gold on it and the silver on it. Oh, I went into the food. I went into everything on this book. So yeah,
I want to say this, and then I want you to keep going. But yeah, I read the book and I kept getting hungry.
Yeah, good. Yeah, me too. Me too. When I read the stuff, because I've tasted most of the stuff that just about everything they had there. When I worked at an office down in Los Angeles, they put me in charge of the Chai Club. The Indians did. So I was able to speak a little bit of Hindi, and I would call them, if they annoyed me, I would call them brats in Hindi, and they would laugh. So I was in charge of that and all the food. So one of the things that I did was I actually taught them how to make dosa. Dosa is kind of like one of their breads. And they make it on a flat pan, and the different areas have different dosa batter. And the different areas also have the different chutney that you put on the dosa. So I was in charge of making 60 people. So what I took was the waffle iron, and I started timing it with the waffle iron and say, wow, okay, depending on what type of beans they use, whether it was lentil and mung beans and all the others, it took a lot longer. So I would time it. And then when I got to the office, I would just spray it with coconut oil as a nonstick, and then I would put the different batters in it, and I knew how long they took based on I tried to do it at home. So they were fascinated that they can make dosa with a waffle iron, and they started doing it at home, some of them, and say, oh, my God, Carl, you saved me so much time. I've got all these guests, and I'm making these dosa. And then, the waffle, it holds the chutney better, because it has those little squares in it. And they could put the different chutney on each of the waffles. So they had all of these. So I was teaching Indians how to cook dosa. That's the funniest thing. So yes, so I called myself, I was in IT, so I called myself a dosa developer instead of Java developer. So yeah. So we were joking around.
I love that so much. I just love that so much. Yeah, the food is very complicated. I actually have a lot of neighbors that are East Indian here and where I live, and I've been to India quite a few times. I want to ask you, because this was number one. I'm just going to kind of emphasize something that you said. This is a very beautiful book. It is so romantic, and you have crossed the cultures and also the karmic thing, the parallels in the lives, like the way you weave the story together. It's very complicated. You do have to pay attention to the pieces of it. But what inspired you to write this in the first place? And do you have a connection with dance, or just what inspired you?
Well, a couple things. I do love dance. And, I was, I'm like, why don't they have dancers like Fred Astaire anymore? Ginger Rogers. Remember that?
Yeah.
Why don't they have those? We need a really good dance movie, and you could merge it, the second generation of this book, you could merge it with American dance, and India has that. They have a very Americanized version of that. One guy who dances kind of like Michael Jackson, and most of the stuff is done in the studios right now. So I could shoot 90% of the movie in here. I could shoot 90 to 95% of the movie right in the United States, and you would never notice. Some of the external shots would want to be shot in India, and not everybody even needs to be there. So that would be one of the positive things about it. But I always loved dance, and I love romance. I've dated a few Indian women, and I really like that culture without giving up my culture. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
You can live in a world with both and get and I wish people would realize this and stop competing with the cultures or what's good about this and bad about that. You could take the good in everything. And that's what I really did. I showed the negative in everything to show the good in everything. Mm-hmm. And I showed the honor in everything. So, and the romance, one of the things today is I'm more of a classical romantic. It's not just take out to dinner and, bring her back to your hotel room and stuff like that. I love the conversations. And if you want to talk about the greatest romantic, it was definitely Ingénée. There's no doubt about it. He owns romance,
Yeah.
So I remembered that portion of it, and I said, how do I add some of that Ingénée character into these women? Because you'll see that they want more. They want more than just the typical romance. Mm-hmm. They want the excitement. They want the knowledge. Remember the Renaissance man, on how, or the Renaissance woman. Ingénée was a Renaissance woman before there were Renaissance men. So, studying about your religion, your philosophy, your arts, your culture. And remember, food is a culture. It is an art form. And so taking all that into account, I wanted to make sure I showed them as real romantics. So how would that be displayed in a book where you could show the Indian romantic as well as the American romantic or Western romance? And so that's how it was the merging. So there was a little bit sprinkling of Ingénée in there in some of the characters when I wanted to up the ante on the intellect and the characters in there. So that's really how I started doing the book. Although I forgot about the whole Ingénée book when I did the screenplay originally on Dance With Me, and it was only recently that I just decided to, like I said, write that Ingénée book, and for some reason it spoke to me, like, get it out. So this screenplay also had to do with when I worked in Florida for a telecommunications company. This guy who was a database administrator was the best cook ever. He would make this Indian food, obviously from India, better than any restaurant. And then he introduced me to the movies of the Bollywood films. And he would narrate the movie, and I would look at it through body language, and I understood the whole movie. It was amazing. And he would narrate, you go, okay, this. And even though I didn't know the specifics of what they were saying, I was fascinated with the whole Bollywood thing. And what dance motivated me was a movie called Dil Se, when they danced on a moving train. It wasn't the best dance, but it was the best filmed dance scene I've ever seen in my life. It still is. It still is. If you touch any Indian, and you can actually catch it on YouTube. Put Dil Se dance on train, and you'll see it. And every Indian knows.
How do you spell that? How do you spell that?
Yeah, every Indian knows the film and the song. If you said talk to any, unless maybe they're like 20, but if you talk to any Indian over the age of 30, said, I just watched the movie Dil Se with the dancing on the moving train, and that was like, wow, yeah, they know exactly what you're talking about. And the weirdest part about it is a friend of mine got me the movie as a gift because I couldn't find it. It was like $50, and they got it on eBay for like $12 or $13. And I lent the movie out to about a dozen different filmmakers, guys. No one watched the movie. They went to that dance sequence and watched it 25 times in a row. I've never seen that before in my life. Ever. ever. Didn't even watch the movie. They didn't even know what the movie was about. It was very intense. The movie was very intense, but they didn't watch it. And that's why I knew the power of dance. If you can sit there and watch a dance scene 25 times in a row and not even watch the movie, I never heard of that. That's the power of dance. So now if I could integrate that with a movie, man, I think it would rival Avatar. I really do. I think it would be that big if you do it right. If you do it right.
Yeah, I agree with you. Do that. Could you please do that, Carl? Just make that happen. Yeah, because you got all the right connections. I got to ask you, so the dance scenes, because you have everything very clearly described in the book where you can easily visualize what's going on, to the reader. So you had to really know what you were writing about, and also your action scenes, right? You've got action going on in there. I got to ask you, was there any particular moment or a scene that was especially challenging to write?
All of them.
All of them.
All of them. You got to.
That's the right answer.
Comes from the screenplay with all action. Yes, all of them, because here it's very interesting writing a novel because you're a better screenwriter writing a novel and you're a better novelist writing a screenplay, because screenplays are focused on, you don't actually, you leave it up to the director to do a lot of things. You don't have to give excruciating detail. In the book, there's no movie, so you have to be able to visualize everything going on. So as a director, when I'm reading the screenplay, I use my skills to write that. And so I even went into like one of the it's not really dance, but it is dance, parkour, where they do that amazing stuff where they're jumping from building to building and all that insane stuff, risking their life. That's in the second half of the book. So I said, I got to put some parkour. That's going to be amazing. And that came from when I did differences between men and women. And I'll have to send you the link to the movie. You could watch it. It's on YouTube. It's on YouTube, but you have to be over 18 because there's some scenes in there. They banned me from festivals for that movie. Even the festival directors say, well, there were some scenes in that movie. It's a comedy, and they banned me. But they just said, they didn't actually, wasn't like an official ban, but the reviewers said their audience couldn't handle the content.
Okay, all righty.
You're going to just laugh at the two things that they said. But anyway, one of the things that made that movie really good is we got some amazing dancers in it. And I have a parkour guy. He did a backflip during a dance sequence in an airport hangar, did a backflip off the ladder into a back handspring back on his feet. And we got it with two red cameras, professional cameras in slow motion. I would say that was amazing. But the hardest one was these two women running. Just picture a woman running, and she does like a split midair. She jumps and does a split midair, her front leg and her back leg. We had two women running from opposite directions, and the split had to match. Okay? 33 takes until we got it right. And so that level is what I used in there.
I'm just laughing because it's like, okay, go again. Those poor women are like, oh my gosh.
So I even have in the book, I'll tell you how I saved $130,000 from baking somebody cookies. The airport hangar, if you could do the math, Betty, if you're good at math, just figure this out. $350 per hour per eighth of a hangar, per eighth. We got it for 2 days for 16 hours, okay? And $2,000 per hour in the Georgetown airport, right here, north of Austin, and that was $2,000 per hour. So I went to the guy, and it was $136,000. I didn't tell him my budget was $900. So I walked in there and asked him if he could, give us a discount. And he was telling us these stories about when his grandmother used to leave him homemade peanut butter cookies on his nightstand when he was a little boy, and she didn't want to wake him when she got there early because I don't know, she had to pick her mother up for work or whatever. She had to do something there. So she would smell the little peanut butter cookies, and no grandma was there. So I said, we got to bake them peanut butter cookies. So we got the recipe from the 1940s. The guy was an old guy. And we said, how do we make it? So they said, the flour has changed so much, the closest thing we could use was Ethiopian teff flour. So I said, let's do it. So we used whole wheat flour, half Ethiopian teff flour, real organic peanuts, real organic everything. We baked this guy, and we brought it to him and said, this is just a gift, because I don't have a lot of money. He waived the fee and charged us $340 a day.
Oh, my goodness.
$640 instead of $130,000.
That's a great...
Everybody was doing me stuff. And even when I broke the Guinness World Record, Waters out of Dallas gave us the wedding dress train and dress for nothing. And so that movie, even though it was a short film, it probably would have cost close to $200,000. It was the price of a full-length feature. So Everybody helped me. Everything was falling into place for that movie. And I did show it to Armand, who launched Tom Hanks' career. He loved the film. So it didn't go through the old channels, but a lot of people were watching that movie. The trailer at that time had more views than any Academy Award winner or nominee in that category at that time.
Wow, that's crazy. So we are down to like the last minute of the show, Carl. So what is the last thing that you want to say? Where can people find you? And then we're out of time. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You could find the books on Amazon. My website is Carl David Blake Productions. My Instagram is Carl David Blake 1. So connect to me on Instagram. These books are... They're absolutely phenomenal. I'm not saying because I wrote it. It's because all the people and all the mentors who inspired me, and wherever that old scholar, I know he's passed on long ago, and this is in honor of you. I wish I remembered your name because I would put it in the beginning. He told me that nobody has ever written down the Ingénée story. 99.99% of the greatest stories in the history of the world have never been written down. Think of all the great stories in your life. How many did you write down? Probably none. So this was in honor of him, in honor of all the great scholars who ever lived. And I want to thank you so much for letting me be on the show. Thank you, Loretta, and thank you, Benny. We love you, Benny.